Hi everybody, Sean here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about selective sharpening. I got a lot of questions on my Twitter account that were asking me about selective sharpening and if I could give a demonstration of how I do it, because everybody does it a different way. They're really, with a lot of things in Photoshop and Lightroom, there's a lot of things to do in different ways. There's not really just one way. Sometimes there's tons of ways to do one thing, and depending on what suits for you is how you can do it. Now this way suits me, so I would like to show you what I do in my daily workflow. Basically, what do I do every time I sharpen, specifically in this instance, portraits. Okay, that's what we're going to be fixing on today, is portrait retouching, sharpening. In the past, this was one of the most accurate ways to do it. However, they do now have an actual sharpening icon in Photoshop. I use it occasionally when I'm in a pinch, but I still find this to be more accurate. I have a lot more flexibility, a lot more control. So this is kind of like the old school way of doing it, but I talk to a lot of portrait photographers. They're still using this method, and this isn't necessarily just for portraits, but this is how I use it with my portraits. And I'm going to go through a couple things. So we're not sharpening on a global scale, because let's face it, especially when you're talking about skin tones and portraits, sharpening is going to start looking funky, especially if you're using a high amount of sharpening. The skin is going to start looking like leather. Not everything is supposed to be sharp. As a matter of fact, people will go out of the way to actually make skin and whatnot look silky smooth for a natural feel. So we don't want that to sharpen. So what do we sharpen? Well, I'm actually going to go through how to make it where you're able to selective sharpen instead of on a global level. So let's go through that first, and then I'll show you what I tend to do as far as what parts and what things do I sharpen and what do I leave alone. Because remember, especially if we're working for a client, we don't want anything to start looking funky. As you can see, I have my panels out here that I'm going to be working with today, and the number one that I'll be working with is the navigator panel. So make sure that I just find it a lot easier to move around the image because we're going to be doing a lot of panning and zooming, and I find the navigator is a good way to, I'll show you, is a good way to move around. See, I'm moving the square here on the navigator panel, so that works for me. Okay, we're going to hit the hand here, go back to normal. Okay, so let's talk about sharpening. What is your methods? Let's go this by one step at a time. So first we have the background layer, which is what comes up when you open up the image. Okay, so I'm going to go through this real slow for you guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Command Control J. Control if you're on a PC, Command if you're on a Mac. I'm on a Mac. So for me it's going to be Command J. What did that do? Well, if you look here, it made a background. It made a copy of the layer. So I basically duplicated the same layer. So we have two layers. You'll understand why as I go through this tutorial with you. Okay? So we're going to be working off of this duplicate layer. This way our background original layer stays intact. So we're going to work non-destructively. I'm going to go back to the layer 1. And you can label this, you can name it, Let's see. We can name it Sharpen. So we know that this is going to be our sharpen layer. And that just helps me stay organized. You can even color code them. But to save time, we're not going to do any of that. That's all up to you, if that helps you organize. I know when you're starting to work with a Photoshop file and you get really involved in a project, sometimes you can have many layers and folders and groups, and it starts to look really hectic. And I find that, I know a lot of people don't do it because it takes time, but if you put the time in as far as labeling your layers and color coding them and whatnot, it will work out for you in the long run. It's going to make things a lot easier. So we have that duplicate layer. Now what are we going to do? We're going to sharpen that layer. So we're going to go up to Filter, we're going to go to Sharpen, and we're going to go to Unsharp Mask. I find that works the best for this. And it gives us a little preview. Now, I'm going to tell you something right now. I'm going to put the amount, actually I'm going to put the amount up to 150. Do not do this, okay? Especially if you're working on portraits. I'm using 150 for a couple reasons, okay? Number one is so you could see the results. Normally, I would not put this much amount when I'm working on a project like this, okay? Maybe if you're doing some odd texture, you know, you have to play that by ear. But for this, definitely not 150% amount. Again, I'm doing it so it will translate. You have to remember, I'm screen recording this. I'm going to be downgrading it. I'm going to be uploading it to YouTube, okay? You could be viewing it on a phone. You could be viewing it on an iPad, whatever. It's, you know, the resolution isn't going to be the greatest. So I'm upping the amount of the sharpening so that you're able to see the results here. But normally you wouldn't use this much amount. Okay? So again, this is just for the demo purposes only of this tutorial. So I'm going to put 150. What would I use? I don't know. I would start around 40 and work my way up from there in that area. Maybe up to 115, 120. But like I said, we're going to do 150. We're going to hit the OK button. Okay? It sharpened it. But it sharpened it so much because it sharpened it on a global scale that the image is going to start looking funky. Like I said, especially skin pores and skin tones. Let's zoom in here. Okay, I don't want this much. You're also seeing a lot of noise and a lot of grain and whatnot. Okay, you know, especially in the skin tones. And stuff is starting to look a little funky. Especially even the background is starting to get noisy. Well, that's cause and effect. You know, we're sharpening, so we have to deal with that. But when we use the unsharp mask filter, it doesn't know that we want only certain parts. How would it know that? It doesn't. So it does it as what I call on a global scale. It's doing the entire image. How do we selectively tell it where we want sharpened and what we want unsharp? Well, remember, we're working under that underlined layer, that non-constructive layer on the bottom. So what are we going to do to the top layer? We're going to add a mask. So we do Alt-Option, and we click the mask button. Notice the sharpness went away. Now, naturally, on YouTube, you know, you're not going to be able to see it that much. But the sharpness went away, okay? You know, pretty much take my word for it. You know, so we actually applied the unsharp mask filter, and we hit it. We hit it with a black mask. Now you're thinking to yourself, you know, why? Why do that? Now you can't see any of the sharpening. Well, the sharpening is still there. It's just in a mask. So now we can actually paint the parts that we want sharpened and leave the rest of the image untouched. So now we're going to tell Photoshop, well, I want this sharpened, I want this sharpened, I want this sharpened. Here's the rules of layer masks. I know I haven't done a tutorial on it yet, so I'll just skip ahead here. Where we have a black mask. So what do you think would show on a black mask? A white brush. So we're going to set our foreground color to white, and we're going to pick our brush. Now, I'm on a Wacom pen tablet, a bamboo. Okay? It doesn't matter, you know, it's just going to be easier for me to demo this on, but your mouse or whatever, you can set your brush size with the bracket keys, okay? Okay, right bracket bigger, left bracket smaller. Or with the scrubby slider, you can manually select, you know, your brush size here. But it's easier with the bracket keys. And we can get, you know, with the pen tablet, we can get pretty involved. But it doesn't matter, it'll work with a mouse. Now, what are we going to sharpen? Now we'll get to that part. So, people on Twitter ask me, what do you sharpen when it comes to portraits? What do you selectively tell it to sharpen? I do 3 things, okay? And not every single image it's going to work on, but most of the time it does. I do eyes. I sharpen eyes because I'll tell you why. Now naturally it's going to look funky because remember I have my amount set to 150 for the demo purposes for you guys to see it. But normally this looks very good. Your focus on portrait photography is eyes. It's the most sharpest thing, and sure, you're trying to get it in camera, okay? And you can only do so much, and you have to at least start with a sharp image. So don't think, oh, I could just snap this shot. I'm not going to focus on his or her eyes. No, no, get it right in camera. Remember, this is just helping it further in Photoshop. You can't work off of a blurry image. I can't stress that enough. And you may not have the sharpest glass, but you got to get a working area. So get your image sharp to begin with. I like to focus on the eyes, and I like to bring out the quality and the highlights of the eyes. So I sharpen the eyes. The second thing I sharpen is the hair. It just does something to the hair. It brings the highlights out. It brings the clarity. Especially if you're not using RAW and you're shooting in JPEG, which I push RAW, but in this case we're shooting, we're working off of a JPEG image. But that's one of the things that I focus on as far as sharpening is the hair. So we're going to concentrate on the hair. What's the third thing? Jewelry. Earrings, necklaces, and also I'll throw in a fourth one. I do denim creases, buttons, zippers, just stuff that I think that draws attention to the eye and makes it pop with sharpen. But that's all selective taste. So we're going to go here quickly, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time. You could definitely go into detail here. But for the purpose of this demo, we're going to go here and we're going to zoom in. We're going to use our navigator panel here. We're going to zoom into the first eye. We're going to grab our brush. Okay, I'm going to use the left bracket key to bring it down a little and watch. Also do the eyelashes. Okay? Now I know what you're saying. Oof, that's a lot of sharpening. But remember, that's just for the purpose of this demo. You're not going to use an unsharp mask amount as high as I did. You're not going to use that. We're going to go through this eye. And wow, what a difference. It's subtle changes like this that make a big difference when you have your image, especially when your image is printed. And a lot of those details show when you print that you normally wouldn't see on screen. Let's go through the jewelry. We'll do her earrings here. Okay, I'm going to use a smaller brush so it doesn't go into the skin tones. And like I said, we could really go crazy here and spend our time. We'll even do all this. Don't worry about the hair because we're going to actually get to the hair. So when you're painting, if it goes into the hair, don't worry because you want to sharpen that too for most of the matter. I'm going to go through this. So this is my workflow. The people on Twitter ask me, what is your workflow? This doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be yours. However, it works for me. I'm going to use the right bracket key. I'm going to do the hair here. Now I'm doing it pretty fast for this video, but you would want to take your time and make sure you stay in the guidelines of the hair. Don't sharpen things that you don't want sharpened because you'll notice it, especially naturally if you're using a high amount. We're going through the hair, and as I'm doing this, I could see night and day. I'm not sure how it's coming out on the video, but in person, when you try this, you're going to say, whoa, you'll just see such a clarity. You can also do eyelashes as well. Okay. Finish that up. And you can futz and go crazy. But that's that. So let's zoom out.